Hi everyone, my name is Phil Martin. I'm from the University of York, and I'm going to talk today about the idea of whether or not we need to hang on to this concept of AI literacies that we've been talking about for the last couple of years or more since the release of ChatGPT. I'd like to argue 3 points and go through some examples, but the main point of what I'm going to say in this brief talk is I want to try and argue that AI literacy is something that we should focus on. I definitely think from my experience of teaching it over the last couple of years, it's something that's worth keeping, given the changes that AI has brought to the sort of just the general educational landscape, the incentives, structures around studying, and the way we need to talk to students. But I think it just needs to be, we need a rethink of what AI literacy means. And the point of this presentation is to argue that it should be less focused on tool familiarity and more on the more kind of philosophical side of things to get students thinking about how and why they learn. I'm going to go through a quick example lesson, but the materials that I discuss are a small sample. Schemes of work and everything are set to everyone who has the link can view, and links will be in the show notes down below. So, right, where were we 2 years ago? So when I first started thinking about how to embed or embrace, as everyone likes to say, AI literacy in English for academic purposes, I was working with a colleague of mine, and we drew up a rough kind of scheme of work of things that what we thought would be useful for students to know. And a lot of what we were coming up with was based around this idea of tool familiarity. So we would have students in class. The idea was they're very hands-on, practical sessions with teachers, with students getting to grips with the tools of the day, chatbots and other platforms. And we would focus on things like writing prompts. There was an argument of the around the language that students need to use from prompts differing from what they would normally use, which is fairly valid. Using image generators, so how students might exploit these in their presentations, for example. Again, there was a bit of prompt work in this. The idea of critiquing AI output was very much something that we tried to work into this AI literacies provision. So students would put in either an essay or just a simple task request and look critically at what it was coming out with. And of course, tool familiarization, AI can be a great study aid, as we all know. It can really help us with all kinds of interesting ways. But when I got to review this and as I was teaching it, there were some problems that kind of emerged with a tool familiarity approach to AI literacies. Number one was it's just not. I feel like a bit of a fraud, really. It's not my area of expertise. I don't have any business teaching how to use ChatGPT. I mean, the students are only one step ahead of me anyway, and it was also something I didn't find had much durability, because the speed, even if you did get a foothold on what the limitations and affordances were of certain platforms, they would change within 5 minutes, and you would be saying to the students, but AI can't do something that it could do the following week. So very, very short shelf life of this approach. I think also it was lacking some meaning for the students, in the sense that we were reacting without having a cause in why we were putting this provision in place. So the idea that AI isn't going anywhere is no doubt true, but it doesn't by itself provide a rationale for class time being utilized. Students were often off task as well, as you might expect with a very hands-on practical lesson. One of the downsides is that devices are distraction machines, and it's quite hard to get students working in a unit. They're too fragmented. They're glued to their screens. So when we rethought how to what was missing, how can we update, how can we make it meaningful, how can we address some of these problems, the most recent iteration of this AI literacies provision drew more on what I'm going to call the science of learning. This is looking at things specific like how do we learn? What do we know about the cognitive architecture of the mind? How do we get, what techniques do we know reliably transfer knowledge into long-term memory? Why do we do this? Why do we learn languages when translators can speak them for us? We evidently have much less need to, but we still do them. So there must be other motivations, and we'd like to look at that. AI encourages streamlining and summarizing, which sounds fantastic, but what do we lose when we do this? There are always trade-offs in the mix, surely. When I rely too much on streamlining my workload and efficiency gains, and I don't take a slow amount of time to linger over dense texts, and that friction that you find quite unpleasant at the time, but that I'm losing. What do we lose when we make it all dead easy? And also, an interesting thing I've sort of started including is to really talk to students about when human authorship matters, because it's not always intuitively clear. We have AI doing all kinds of things. It writes code, it writes letters for us. But at what point do we need to retain human in the loop? We can very, convincingly argue that we don't particularly lose much when AI writes legal documents for us, but it's very different when it comes to music and the creative arts, because we've seen a backlash against AI art and music, certainly. So what does this look like in the classroom? So an example lesson I'm going to just quickly run through with you now is one that I focus on the idea of cognitive offloading and outsourcing. So what do these terms mean? They may not be immediately obvious to us. So from the science of learning, it's this idea of cognitive offloading is the idea of kind of like the way we'd use a calculator to offload arithmetic that enables us to free up our cognitive space to do more complex calculations. That will be offloading. It's kind of like using the extended mind to really help us achieve greater heights, whereas outsourcing is simply having something do the thinking for you. You might, maybe a better example of this is a GPS, where you simply follow the map and you're not freeing up your space to do anything other than think about, listen to music or something. So these are two different terms. I talked to the students about these. What does the literature say? Well, what I've just laid out to you is covered in literature by people like Paul Kirshner and Carl Hendrick, who have books like How Learning Happens, which summarizes all the articles that have really made an impact in the field of science of learning. So they also have great Substacks, which present the same ideas in really clear, plain English ways. And we'll follow this up by some class discussion and get students to think about how, can they identify with any of these terms? Which do they use most of? We'll then get some hands-on use of GenAI tools. So the tool familiarity bit is retained. I'm not abandoning it. It's not a philosophy class. They will play. The last time I did this, we used Notebook LM, and I got students to play around with the features. And then they do a reflection where they would decide for themselves, given what we've just read in the literature, what's going on here? Are they offloading, outsourcing, and is it beneficial? So this all comes together in the form of a digital project assessment, which kind of has three parts. So we go through a lot of these debates in the scheme of work over the kind of 24 weeks of the course. And I'll ask them to write about ethical discussions like, would an AI university be a success? Given what we've covered, what literature we've looked at, should universities set students take-home assignments for final marks? Will the net benefit of generative AI give us something better for higher education? To what extent will experience with AI be more valuable to employers than subject-specific knowledge? So I'm really thinking about this idea of, we often hear the words that employers are expecting students to come to work AI savvy. Well, what does this mean? Does it mean that you've given over some of your curriculum time to using ChatGPT at the expense of subject-specific knowledge? And does this matter? Should AI companies be allowed to use copyrighted material to train their platforms? So again, this is one of the more recent debates we've looked at that's been unfolding in the UK this year. Then once they've written about this, I'll just go back a slide here because that pen and paper symbol is there for a purpose. I do get students to write about this. We have a dedicated section of tech-free class time in which students put their thoughts down in an unplugged analog environment. Accessible alternatives are available. They then put this together in a digital project, and I'm hoping the sound's going to come through on this recording because I want to show you an example. So they'll take what they've written and basically transfer their thesis into a video short. And to create this video short, they create all the component parts using AI. So they would use this to get the images, the animations, the storyboards, the text to speech, and they bring it all together in Canva. So that they really do get the chance for the tool familiarity is very much still at the center of this. So I'm just going to play you an example of the student work who's happy for me to share this.
Let's be honest, AI in college right now is like that one sketchy uncle who showed up uninvited to Thanksgiving. Everyone's whispering about him, and the university administration is having a literal panic attack, screaming, "Ban it, it's a devil, everyone is cheating." But honestly, is creating an AI-free university a stroke of genius, or are we just clowning ourselves? Let's talk. Look, I get why the professors are crying. We've all seen the magic trick. A student clicks one button, rubs their hands together, and bam! A 2,000-word master's thesis appears out of thin air. No brain cells were harmed in the making of that essay. It's pure ghostwriting. It makes our brains as soft as mashed potatoes, and it's a total slap in the face to the nerds who actually study. So yeah, banning AI sounds like a great way to save humanity from stupidity. But hold your horses, AI isn't just a cheat code for lazy people. Have you ever opened a 50-page academic reading at 2 a.m. and felt your soul leave your body? To me, ChatGPT isn't a cheater. It's a 24/7 unpaid tutor that translates nerd English into human language. And for international students who are fighting for their lives with language barriers, AI is a literal oxygen mask. If you ban it, you aren't just stopping the slackers, you're kicking the crutches away from students who are just trying to survive. And here's the absolute funniest part. The real world doesn't give a damn about your AI-free degree. When you graduate, your future boss isn't going to say, "Wow, you didn't use AI? Here's a medal." No, they'll fire you because the guy next to you did the whole week's work in 5 minutes using an AI prompt. A university banning AI is literally like a swimming school that refuses to let students touch water because they might drown. Like, bro, that's the whole point of the school. So, structural conclusion, a total AI ban is a massive fail. We can't run away from the future in a cardboard box. Stop trying to ban the tech and start teaching us how to use it. Honestly, legally, and like absolute geniuses. Class dismissed.
Right, so that was the student stance. That was based on their handwritten essay that they did, and it was all kind of just like recomposed as a video short. And as you can see, all of it was using AI components. So I really I don't know where the music came from. That was entirely her choice. But we would have tutorials about this and just kind of guidance along the way. But what was followed with the tool familiarity part was the reflection. So once we've made a video project, we've done our writing, the students have to write just a short paragraph, again, pen and paper based, accessibility aside. Again, they get an option there. But has GenAI helped you really understand the subject matter better? You've just used it to create this cool product, but has it helped you learn? Were those visuals really better than something you could get from stock media? Was there a point of using AI? Did it bring anything to the table? I love the visuals in that video. I hope, I'm not sure if anyone shares that, but I thought they were really well constructed, and definitely AI did something cool there. But I'm also interested to know if they've changed their mind about the usefulness of GenAI in any way. And finally, just this idea of, we did a video short. How much of that, it was cool, it was all AI facilitated, but did it add anything to the communication that was more robust than just writing in pen and paper? All of these are for them to decide. We get some very different answers in. So as I say, I'll put the links to this scheme of work and the project brief in the show notes here in the YouTube description. But I'd just like to end with a quote from Carl Hendrick. So this was the author I mentioned earlier. He's got a Substack on the science of learning, and he put a great post up last November, just kind of really eviscerating this idea of AI literacy and saying, what does it actually mean? We can't even agree on what it means. And he pointed to this propensity for the academy to simply stick the word literacy after things we don't understand and claim that we're on top of it. So that was a great read, and I'll link to that as well in the show notes. But it's kind of like it's a really good word of warning as well about this thing of whatever we are teaching students, we do want it to be durable. So again, back to the central argument of what I'm trying to outline here is tool familiarity is great, and it's definitely something that has a place. But the idea of AI literacies, if it's to mean anything, has to not just be that. It must be about this thinking more deeply about what is useful for us and in terms of our learning, and thinking about our motivations for doing any of this stuff in the first place. And I think once students have got a handle on that, then they'll be able to critically appraise the tools as they change for themselves. So that was really all I had to say on that. Again, references in the show notes. Quick plug for the podcast. A lot of everything that I've covered here is basically episodes that we've talked about in the podcast, and guests have come in and really contributed to the way this has kind of unfolded, this idea of AI literacies. So please do check that out, subscribe if you're not already. And in the show notes of each episode is what's hopefully a very useful reading list connected to each topic. So I'm done, and thank you for listening. Email in the show notes too, so please drop me a line with any questions.